right, hello and welcome to another Expert Insight interview. My name is John Golden from SalesPOP, online sales magazine, and Coavera, formerly Pipeliner CRM. Joining you as usual from, well, actually a bit of a rainy San Diego for a change. And I'm delighted to be joined on the other coast from Boston, Curtis Sprouse. How are you doing, Curtis?
I'm doing well, John. Thanks for having me join your podcast today. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. You're the founder and CEO of Eureka Connect, a firm that uses validated behavioral science and data-driven assessments to develop high-performing leaders and teams, especially in biopharma, healthcare, and high-tech sectors. Over 30 years experience in pharmaceutical strategy, healthcare entrepreneurship, finance, and executive coaching. You've worked with thousands of leaders and you serve on boards such as 48 Hour Discovery. You're a frequent podcast guest and a thought leader. A lot of your work recently is around the fabric of unstoppable leaders, right? And exploring fear and leadership, behavioral wiring for innovation, and those kind of things. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. You've been kind of focused on behavioral science as a missing link in leadership, right? You know, particularly in the industries you're talking about. Is this more critical than ever now, do you think, because the rapid pace of change and how there's so much disruption across industries, and I'm sure in pharma and those it's even more so?
I believe that the data, John, helps us to get more quickly and more efficiently to the opportunity that exists to develop individuals and their ability to collaborate, to lead, to work with others in a more efficient and effective way. You and I, I like to. Do you have a significant other?
I do.
Yeah. So you're married?
Yeah, I do. My wife. Yeah.
Okay. So do you trust your wife?
I do.
Yeah. So you trust your wife because of years of interactions and, dealing with hard things and navigating things and family dynamics and et cetera, et cetera. But if you met somebody that looked just like your wife, exactly like her, that wasn't your wife, would you trust her the same way?
No.
No. And so the data just helps us to develop that deeper understanding of who the other person is. And it allows us to understand where we may have dynamics of our personality um, that are maybe extreme, that can be disruptive, that can be damaging, that can be problematic. And it helps us to understand how to better correct for those. So I believe the data is an important tool and it's a component of the discussion, but it isn't the entirety of the discussion.
Yeah. Because let's face it, Curtis, right? Self-awareness is one of the hardest things for people, right? And for me, it's the greatest inhibitor to success is lack of self-awareness. Unfortunately, a lot of us come to self-awareness much later than we should have, really, but that's life. How much does having data and being able to show data help people during that kind of self-awareness journey? Because sometimes it's not easy for people.
It's a great question. I think it depends on the individual. Are they interested in being better? And I don't think that's a faction of age or where you are in your career. I think it's a faction of the individual and who they are and what they want to become. I have many CEOs who have enormous blind spots, and they think because of the CEO, they've made it. And while in fact they have, maybe from an economic or title perspective, from a professional development and contribution perspective, many of them have much to learn. And self-awareness is at the root of it, John. They don't understand that they are, very few people are willing to tell the emperor they have no clothes. So when a CEO is acting poorly, very few people on their team are willing to tell them that. And so they assume because no one's saying anything that everything's fine. And in fact, many cases and many times it's not. So I see many, many CEOs that struggle to be the best version of themselves and create greater companies because of those blind spots. Just talking today with a very senior person at a company who was reflecting on the fact that the CEO just really has no people skills, doesn't like people. There's that narcissistic, but the company's been pretty successful. As successful as it could have been? No, not by any stretch. But because it's been more successful than other companies they measure themselves against, the CEO thinks that he's brilliant.
Right.
And so they continue down that path. And they lose a lot of great talent. They lose a lot of very good people to other companies because of that.
Yeah. What does an unstoppable leader look like? What's the fabric of an unstoppable leader?
I, I think I think more than unstoppable, I think it's consistent.
Mm,
Right? Does the leader consistently contribute to an advance? Because it's not always going to be good.
yeah.
Because a leader has a couple of years where the company maybe is off and they're not performing, there's dynamics that the leader doesn't control. You know, worldwide wars,
Yeah.
conflicts abroad, changes in currency. I have one client that it's an Israeli company. They do 90% of their business in the US, and because the dollar has declined in value,
Mhm,
they are really struggling to hit their forecast, and they're not going to hit it. Is it a
mhm.
reflection of the CEO? I don't believe so, but the CEO is responsible. So I think that when you talk about an unstoppable leader, I think it's someone that realizes that they're constantly building and strengthening their team, and they're able to delegate in a way where they trust that their people can define and solve problems
Right.
without having them always present. I remember years ago, I have a very good friend who was the CFO of a publicly traded company, and he said, as a CFO, you sign off on documents and you assume that the preparation and all the work behind that document is accurate. But he said,
Mhm.
you have no idea. But at the end of the day, you're liable.
Yes.
And so you have to make sure that you've built a team that you trust to do that work. And I think that a great unstoppable leader is constantly developing people's ability to define and solve problems and
Right.
take on responsibility. I had a client today, an engagement. It's a new company for us, but it's an old client. This
Mhm.
gentleman brought us to the last three companies he's worked at, and he said, I want my team to take on more responsibility. And I said, you want them to be responsible for the outcome, not just the strategy.
Yeah.
Meaning, who's responsible for the outcome?
Mhm.
And I think leaders are good at assigning that responsibility and then holding people accountable to the outcome.
Yeah. And I think the other thing, Curtis, is sometimes leaders struggle with in situations like that is allowing people the space to do it their way and judge it on the outcome and the results as opposed to, you know, a lot of times it's when it starts to deviate from the way you would do it, you start to go, I'm not sure about this instead of trusting the process.
Absolutely, John. We all like to hear our own voice. We all like to see our own, our own work. We all like to get credit for, the good things that happen.
Yeah.
And I think the great leaders have the humility to understand that there's, I like to use this analogy. When you leave our home, you can drive into the center of town, and if you
Mhm.
make a right, it's like, I forget exactly 2.1 miles, and if you make a left, it's like a little bit more than one, you know,
Right.
not quite 1 mile, right?
Mhm.
We're talking about hundreds of yards in difference. And so I get to the end of the driveway, and if my mother-in-law is in the car, she'll say, "Make a right," and I invariably make a left.
You're right.
And it doesn't matter. Like,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
reality of it is it's equal distant to the center of town, no matter which way you go, but I wanna control that decision at the end of the driveway, and it
Yeah.
sounds so silly, but yet those elements creep up in everything we do.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the things that comes up in your work as well is leadership misidentification, and this is something I think that's across all industries, right? Is that where we just take the best of people and we make them leaders. You're the best at what you do, and your team has grown, therefore you are now the leader of that, right? Without any regard as to whether you have any leadership traits. Rarely do we train you or whatever. And it seems to be that we're stuck in this singular career path a lot of the times. Like you can only define success by moving up the management chain.
I agree with you. We don't teach people how to lead. And
Mhm.
I think what we try to emphasize is starting with making the person a better, more rounded, more consistent engager of others. Look,
Hmm.
it starts with the relationship. If you and I get along, we'll do a lot more together than if we don't,
Right.
right? And if we get along, we're more inclined to think together, to define problems together, to work through different solutions together. And so it all starts with a relationship. I go back to your wife. How many things have you and your wife worked through that others don't know anything about? And figured it out, right? It's just you work through it in the privacy of your
Mhm.
home, and you think about it jointly. And that process isn't always, you're not always aligned,
Yeah.
right? You have differences of opinions or different views on it, but yet um, you find a way to a decision, and you move forward and you go on to the next problem. That's lacking in our teaching leaders how to work with their teams.
Mhm.
That idea of, you are best at working with somebody when you know them.
Yeah.
When you know them. This gentleman I was talking to this morning, years and years and years ago, I was hired to help him. He was a VP, work with another VP, and the two of them were not getting along. And when we were doing our discussion, and I was saying to the two of them, well, what is it that you guys disagree on? And there was a project where she had developed one strategy and he had developed another, and they didn't feel that the other had listened to them, and
Mhm.
so on and so forth. And I said, do you guys know each other? And they were responding, "Yeah, I know that, she has 2 children, and she knew that
Mhm.
he had 3." And I said, "No, you knew things about each other,
Yeah.
don't know each other."
Mhm.
And 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 what he reflected on with me years later is that when I got to know her, I really liked her, and I didn't feel that I was competing anymore. I felt that we could work together. And
Right.
that's just a matter of your perception is not accurate once you finally do understand who that person is. And so, again, those are the types of things we try to accelerate that process whereby people can understand what those barriers are and how to overcome them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that the other part too, and this is, I think, becoming more of an issue than ever now, is obviously leaders need to be trusted, right? So they need to understand how to build trust in the organization, and a lot of what you said earlier, a lot of trust comes from consistency and showing up the same way all the time. But talk to me a little bit about how important the trust is now, particularly because we have AI and all of this other stuff, and people are remote and they're feeling a lot disconnected. So there's a lot wrapped up in that kind of trust element.
Yeah, it's a great topic. I have one of the CEOs I work with. Um, I have diminishing trust. The person is not honest.
Mm,
They don't include people in discussions. They do things and make decisions that should be including others. They misrepresent situations, and it's becoming more prevalent than less. And you hope that people sort of grow out of those bad behaviors, but this particular person's not doing that, and it's of concern, right? Because
mhm,
as a member of the team, I have a fiduciary responsibility to the organization, and while I like many elements of this person, I believe that they're just not doing what they need to do. So, um, many times I've gone to bat for this person in the past, and now
mhm,
they're sort of betraying that the trust I had in them. So I think the trust is earned and it's maintained.
mhm.
Meaning,
And
you just don't get it one time. It's not like buying a new suit. It's
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And is it fair, Curtis, that the trust is established often during the hard times, right? I mean, and it's during that's when you really, see the reality of people.
Yeah, the hard times, or when self-interest can be put easily before the team or
Right.
others.
Yeah.
And when
Mhm.
you gravitate towards that decision, when it may be at the disadvantage of others, for your own benefit, um, it's, I like to talk about, the R's, doing the right thing, being responsible for self, understanding reality, making the right choices, being relevant. Um, all of those things are not always easy to do in concert. It's not
Mhm.
easy. There are things that need to oftentimes be sacrificed in pursuing all of those different
Yeah.
things. And we all, the other day, with this person I was talking to you about. I was in a meeting and I probably could have handled it much better than I did. But, when somebody says something that's not accurate and you've just represented the exact opposite and you
Mhm.
have proof that it's not accurate, then, then emotion takes over. And that's exactly what happened with me. So I
Mhm.
teach this stuff every day and then I find, oh, geez, wow,
Yeah.
could have done that better, right?
Yeah, well, there you go. Well, there's the self-awareness. Perfect. Um, so, and tell me, especially, I mean, in the pharmaceutical industry and all that, as with others, AI is really, starting to disrupt and everything. How are you helping executives like and CEOs adapt to AI and maybe adapt their thinking and their leadership approach to AI?
It's a good question. I don't know if you can hear that in the background.
Oh, fuck, don't worry.
Okay. Um, so adapting to AI, uh, where I work with different individuals that are sort of expert in these areas,
Mhm,
we're exploring different tools that can be utilized, right? But I think that AI is going to be, it's going to be mainstream. It's going to advance. It's going to become more integrated, not less integrated.
mm,
I think we're evolving in how that's occurring, and that evolution is going to occur over a long period of time. It's not going to just end.
mhm,
So there are many unknowns. There are many jobs that exist today that won't exist a year or 2 years from now. Um, but at the end of it, AI will facilitate better access to information, not
mhm.
just data, but information. It will allow for more efficient access to
Yeah.
information and knowledge. And I think then at the end of the day, it always comes down to what do the people that have that knowledge do with it
Yeah.
and how do they act and react to it. So I believe that at the end of the day, when I look at some data that's been provided to me via an AI tool, I still have to convince John that we
Mhm.
agree on what to do after having presented that data to you or
Yeah.
information to you. And so I believe that's trust, right? It's all the things that you were asking about
Yeah.
earlier. Like, what are the things that great, resilient, strong leaders? It's this idea of trust, the ability to communicate, the ability to think, the ability to accept that maybe my my ideas were wrong.
Mhm.
Maybe it is more efficient to make the left out of the driveway than the right, not because it's equal distant, but because there's a light when you go to the left.
Right.
There are no lights when you go to the right. Oh, wait, there's a train track you have to cross when you go to the right. Okay. Well, I can easily look at the train schedule and know that it's not going to impede my journey into town. So
Mhm.
there are other things that need to be considered, and oftentimes we'll ignore a data point because it won't reflect well on our decision or our position.
Right. No, absolutely, absolutely. Or the fact that at the bottom of it all is we just prefer going that way.
Yeah,
Maybe that's the thing we
exactly.
haven't even admitted yet. It's actually just a preference.
Yeah, my wife has this cute little thing where if she if she turns to her left when she leaves a room, she's gotta turn to her right, like there's has to be
But
this balance, and it's just this little subtle thing she does, right? But it makes her happy, and, I notice it on occasion that she'll make a cute little move that you'll like, "Well, that wasn't necessary," but for her, it was, right?
mm. And just one last thing then, in leadership today, right? I mean, there's a lot of things going on, but how do you make that move from the egocentric leadership to going more like legacy? Like I'm more interested in the legacy. I'm more interested in developing others and what I leave behind than I am about showcasing myself.
Oh, that's another great question. I was talking about this today with a leadership team I'm part of. When you can tie it back to something that I call meaningful life,
Mhm.
so if I said to you, John, well, first let me ask you this: do you have children?
I have one yet. Yep.
Yep. Okay, so you have a child. How old's your child?
Oh, he's 21.
21. Okay, 21, a boy. Okay.
Yep.
So if I say to you, John, you should really work on this attribute of your behavior, and you say to me, well, I'm an old guy now, and I'm sort of like I am the way I am, and but if I
Mhm.
said to you, are you reflecting the kind of behavioral traits that you want your son to adopt?
Right.
Is your son the kind of man you want him to be now? And if not, are you setting an example for him as to the things that he needs to learn and perfect and improve upon? And if you're not the example for that, who in his life is? And why have you entrusted it to them and not yourself?
Mm.
And so it's about finding that factor that can motivate the individual to say, maybe I don't do this for myself, but I'm doing it for that 21-year-old young man who, by all intent and purpose has, another 7 years before his prefrontal cortex is fully baked and you're stuck with what he is at that point, right?
That's excellent. Excellent. But it just comes back to, Curtis, doesn't it? Comes back to that simple concept of role modeling, right? And this is what always kind of gets me, and we'll have it again now because of, election season will be coming up and all that, is that this idea of, people don't change because you shout at them and call them stupid or tell them they should do this or do that. They look at you and they look at how you behave, and if they see somebody who they look like, I want to be like that person. That person, I like the way they operate. They do all of this stuff. Then they're more likely to adopt that. So role modeling over pontificating.
I wish it was always that simple.
Hmm.
I think, quite frankly, John, in my experiences, people will change more out of fear than they will out of it's the right thing to do. I
Hmm.
think if I'm worried about losing my job or losing my child to
Hmm.
drugs or whatever,
Yeah.
right? I'm more inclined to make a change in my life than, oh, I want my kid to be a model citizen or I want
Right.
to, excel at my job. I think fear drives decisions more so than doing the right thing. Unfortunately, we know that to be true.
Mhm.
We have our survival instincts. I would hope that people at those that are really the talented ones in the organization strive to elevate their colleagues, and they set examples for the fact that um, yes, it might be a tougher journey at times to
Yeah.
follow all those R's, as I alluded to earlier, but the outcomes in the long term impact on your life is far
Mhm.
better.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely, 100%. Well, listen, thanks so much, Curtis. All of Curtis's information will be below this video. But before we go, please do remind people about what you do.
So Eureka Connect, behavioral science company, we use validated instruments to develop what I call a baseline behavioral mechanisms of action. Why does John act and react the way he does? And by offering that insight to John, he can better focus his personal journey, his development. And we've been wildly successful in working with very senior people, that are, quite far along in their careers, and we've helped them to elevate themselves and the teams around them. And again, eurekaconnect.com, Shauna, Shana at Eureka Connect is my assistant. If you'd like to get a hold of us, and she can get you on my schedule anytime. And then ibeinc.org is my not-for-profit. It's a 5-day course on translation. It helps innovators take their idea from concept to market, and it introduces them to reimbursement, regulatory, clinical
Right.
strategy, positioning within strategic portfolios, all the things that aren't chemistry, biology, and engineering that they need to know to be successful. So those are the two initiatives that I lead, and would love to talk to people about those if they feel that they can be a benefit from those two resources.
Fantastic. Well, listen, thanks again, Curtis. Thank you for watching and listening. I'll see you all again very soon. Thank you.